Quick test. Can my co-hosts hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. Good day, everyone. My name is Sherry Crazel, and I would like to welcome you to the third in our series of Noontime Chatters with the staff at the Miami University Art Museum. This program is being recorded so that we can post it on our YouTube channel soon. Today's presentation is about our sculpture park. We will have an opportunity for questions via the chat at the end of the program, so be thinking about your questions throughout the presentation. At this time, it's my pleasure to turn over the program to our preparator and building manager, David Dotson. David?
Thank you, Sherry, and thank you for all the work you've been putting in on these noontime chats. They've been great. And I want to thank the museum and all the donors that make all of this possible. Our sculpture park really has been founded on donations and gifts, and that's part of what makes it such a great collection. I'm the preparator and building manager here, and part of that is also taking on responsibility of maintaining and preserving our outdoor sculpture park. And we have a lot of really great pieces in this park, and really just a fantastic collection. So a little bit about my background, just from a preparator perspective. I did my BFA and MFA here at Miami University. So I've been a long time, been around here a long time. And so we've seen a lot of things going on in the park and in the museum itself. It's very odd to not talk to people when you're on a Zoom meeting. So if I ramble or stumble, that's just how it's going to go. So I also worked at Cincinnati Zoological and Botanical Gardens as a exhibits sculptor. So we sculpted animal exhibitions and environments there. I did a lot of steel custom work at a place called Republic Design there in Cincinnati. So a lot of background in large scale sculptural work, but also smaller metal work and steel construction. And a lot of that has translated to how we take care of the museum grounds and pieces here. So this is our sculpture park. We have 9 pieces, but 10 if you count the building. In 1978, this building was built and put here. Walter Netsch was the architect. He was a very world-renowned architect. His buildings are known all around the country, around the world, really. And it's also one of the reasons that some of our sculptural pieces are here is because of, it was a big draw for artists to have their pieces with such a renowned architect's work. And he also was friends with a lot of the sculptors that are on our grounds. So it worked out really well for everyone. But let's really get into talking about the sculpture itself. I love sculpture. I love the unique ability of outdoor sculpture to really challenge the viewer, to envelop the viewer at times. You have to navigate it, really move around the space. Sometimes you're going to be on it, through it. It's different. It's a different opportunity than, say, a two-dimensional, or when you're inside of a building or inside of a space where things are, you have more of a different way of understanding what you're looking at. You know, you can look at a painting, it's two-dimensional, you can't really move around it. Whereas outdoor sculpture gives you the opportunity to really investigate in a way that's not possible with some other types of work, that you're not allowed to really touch or feel. And that's one of the big draws of outdoor sculpture. It creates some challenges because outdoor sculpture is always being assaulted by, say, the sun, the elements, people, sometimes vandalism, or sometimes just the use of the sculpture degrades it. You have corrosion, erosion. So there are just a lot of elements that go into maintaining these pieces once they're created and once they're installed. And sometimes they'll be moved, and we'll get into some of that as well. So, like I said, in 1978 is when the really first, well, 78, 79 is when some of the first sculptural pieces started showing up on the grounds. And I did want to read, there was, when the building was dedicated, Dr. Boyle from the University of Iowa, he was the president at that time. He had this to say about museums, specifically educational museums and university museums. He said, "We must recognize that a university's museum of art is a crucible of change, not a mausoleum of artifacts." And I think that that is a really great way to look at how university museums work, because we're not just storing these pieces, we're not just putting them, away, but we're actually trying to create and cultivate students that have a creative way of thinking, that can think of things expressively, creatively, and are able to understand complex concepts and forms of expression, diverse forms of expression. And I think that's very important. And the first piece that we want to look at is going to be Eugene Brown. And this piece is really important because Eugene Brown was an elder of the Miami tribe. Back in 2003, we did a show here at the museum about contemporary artists of the Miami and the Miami. And our connection with the Miami tribe has grown ever since. The university has very cultivated it. The Miami Project, Daryl Baldwin, George Ironstack, all these people involved in that. It's been a very engaging and important process. And so this bronze piece was commissioned as a commemorative piece for the 200th anniversary of the university. And it's based off of a piece that Eugene Brown did in 2003. If you've ever met Eugene Brown, he was a really interesting man. Like I said, he was an elder of the tribe. He was a woodworker. He made flutes, gave away tons of flutes, as you can see from his photo. Just a really amazing man. I got to meet him back then in 2003. A great storyteller, really engaged in the Miami culture and bringing it back. When he was a boy, he was really deprived of that culture. The Native American schools didn't teach about the tribal culture and about where they came from. And so as he got older, he was really discouraged by that and really wanted to bring that back, and became very involved and engaged in the community and in making sure that not only the Miami were preserved, but that other people were able to understand and come together with them. And that's why, again, this piece is really important. It's a bronze piece. It's held together very well. It's called it's a very long name, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about why it's called what it is. But for some reason, it is not in front of me. There it is. Tribe named Miami, a surveyor's stake, a town named Oxford. So the reason it's called that is because when Eugene Brown was first told he would have a piece at the museum, he was unsure of really what to create for that. And so he had spoke to Julie Olds and Bobby Burke, who were both very involved in the Miami. And Bobby Burke gave him a book from Dr. Phil Shriver, who was the president of Miami University for many years. And he wrote a book about his time here. And one of the chapters in that book is called A Tribe Named Miami, a Town Named Oxford. And so Eugene thought he would put the Surveyor stake in the middle of that as his piece. And he really wanted to acknowledge that this piece was about looking at the past, understanding our present, and looking to the future and how we're all connected by the land and what we do with it and how we're all involved in it together. And so I'd like to read the land acknowledgement that Miami University Art Museum has come up with in conjunction with the Miami Center here at the university. Miami University is located within the traditional homelands of the Miami and Shawnee people, who, along with other indigenous groups, ceded these lands to the United States in the first Treaty of Greenville in 1795. The Miami people, whose name our university carries, were forcibly removed from these homelands in 1846. In 1972, a relationship between Miami University and the Miami Tribe of Oklahoma began and evolved into a reciprocal partnership, including the creation of the Miami Center at Miami University in 2001. The work of the Miami Center serves the Miami Tribe community and is dedicated to the revitalization of Miami language and culture and to restoring that knowledge to the Miami people. Miami University and the Miami Tribe are proud of this work and of the Miami students who have attended Miami since 1991 through the Miami Heritage Award Program. The Miami University Art Museum has a close relationship with the Miami Center and is engaged in a process of community curation in its exhibitions, programs, and collections connected to the Miami Tribe. And so, again, it's just a very important piece done by a really great individual who really cares about the land, but also the people. And going from that piece and talking about the land, we're going to move into talking about Nancy Holt, who this piece is titled Star-Crossed, and it's an earthwork sculpture. And a lot of people don't really understand how earthwork sculptures fit into the timeline of sculpture, or is it sculpture? Why is it a big mound? These kinds of things. So we're going to answer some of those questions. Nancy Holt is a world-renowned land art sculptor, land art artist. She's many collections around the world. Her most famous piece is probably the sun tunnels out in Utah. If you've ever seen them, they're pretty amazing. And this piece is directly related to that. She uses the concrete tubing to frame the environment and to see the landscape through. So you can be inside these sculptures and not only just enjoy the feeling of being inside of it, but it frames the environment and you can really focus in on the landscape. Land art became very popular in the 60s and 70s. It was kind of a snub to the galleries at the time because galleries were very commercial, and you had this whole movement of artists like Nancy Holt, Robert Smithson, Carl Andre, Richard Serra. They were all doing these works that were much harder for galleries and the gallery system to get a handle on because they were these large works. You'd have to go out to them to even critique them. And it wasn't easy for these systems to create capital around them, to create money around them. So it was a way for the artists to get away from that environment. And with Nancy Holt, she is one of the premier artists in that respect. This piece itself is called Star-Crossed. And the reason it's called Star-Crossed is because the tube at the top, you can see that's tilted. It's tilted at a 20-degree angle toward Polaris. So if you were looking from the bottom tube up, you would see the North Star in the circle. And if you were to go up on the sculpture and look down through that tube, you would see a reflecting pool that you can see here. And that reflecting pool is oval, but looking through the top tube, it'll become round. And you can see the night sky or the day, depending on where you are. Unfortunately, over the years, that pool is no longer functioning. It's something that we're working on ways of not necessarily fixing, but trying to bring the sculpture up to a point where we have some sort of reflective surface that can really show her vision. But again, this is one of the problems, not really problems, just characteristics of earthworks in general, is that they're a part of nature. So you have to constantly be vigilant in how you're preserving them. Like, for instance, this one, it's very difficult to grow grass on the side of this mound because, you only have so much soil. You have certain conditions. Right now, it's in very good shape. The grounds crew has done an amazing job of finding grasses that actually stay on the surface of this piece really well. There is some minor repair work that we're going to be doing to the tubes, but really, in general, it's in great shape, except for the reflecting pool, which again, we're going to be doing some work to fix. And you can see on the right, that's Nancy. She's sighting in that oval piece right there. Now, this piece was actually set up on a north, south, east, west cross. So where those tubes cross is actually magnetic north and astrological north, which apparently at the time they don't always line up, but in Oxford, Ohio, they do. And she thought that was a very auspicious thing that, it was able to, that those lined up specifically here. And so she was able to set the sculpture exactly where she wanted it in this space. Originally, we had two Nancy Holt sculptures. One of them was a temporary sculpture that was done. This piece was actually brought in by the Visual Arts Club at the time, back in the 70s, about 70. They started in around 78, I believe, 79. And then Starcross was eventually finished by 81. But prior to that, there was a temporary project that they had done called Polar Circle. And it was taken from the Fisher Hall. Fisher Hall had been demolished and they were going to build where Markham Center is now. And so there were these lamp posts lying there that she decided to use as part of her sculpture, and created almost a rotunda with these pieces and chain. And we don't really have any images of it at the moment, but it was eventually, dismantled. But we do have this piece, which is a great piece, and again, very important in the overall history of the art movement. Nancy Holt isn't given as much credit as she should have been. That's changing now. There's I believe in, where was it? Lismore Castle in Ireland. They just recently did a very large retrospective of her work, of land works. She's also known for videography and photography. But yeah, just a really important piece. We're very lucky to have this piece on our campus. Another important artwork we have is by Richard Hunt. This piece is hybrid construction. It's made of Corten steel. Again, he's a world-renowned sculptor. He went to the Art Institute of Chicago, and his interest was lying mostly in African art and how African art pieces moved, and just the delicate balance between figurative and abstract expressionism that he really played with in his work. This piece was actually donated by a docent who is also an art collector, Mrs. Wenzel Wolf. She did a lot of work here at the museum, and we had done an exhibition of Richard Hunt's work back in 1982. And that's where they first were introduced to his work we had his work, and then he also was an avid collector of African art. So we had a lot of those works as well. And then years later, we were able to get this. Mrs. Wolf put it on long-term loan, and then eventually became permanent collection. It wasn't originally in the place that it is now. It was originally right outside the Farmer Gallery, but because Corten steel, so Corten steel, just a little bit about it, it's steel that rusts, and it's supposed to rust. And that rust on the outside, that oxidation, is supposed to keep it from rusting further. However, you do run into problems depending on if you have moisture around, if it can't get good airflow. And so that's what happened in the original location. As you can see on the concrete pad, there's a lot of discoloration from the iron oxide. What was going on, they think, was that piece is hollow in the middle. So there was getting a lot of moisture inside, and it wasn't allowing it to breathe. And so what eventually ended up happening is they brought it out into the sun, put it on a different mount, shimmed the piece up just ever so slightly so that you could get airflow going through the whole piece, and it fixed it, and probably one of our most stable pieces in the collection now. Richard Hunt himself, an amazing artist. He's in every national collection. He was the first African-American sculptor to have a retrospective at the Museum of Modern Art, which is pretty amazing. He honorary degrees from, like 6 different universities, Harvard. He was a Guggenheim Fellow. I mean, just a prolific artist, Chicago artist. He likes to call himself a Midwestern artist, so that's nice. And this is him in his studio. He definitely nailed the studio pose. He also is a printmaker. He does lithographs. This lithograph here is actually one that's in our new acquisitions show at the moment. So you can see his printmaking as well. And then we're going to move on to Mark de Souvero. We're going to talk a little bit more about his some of the things that we've had to do recently. So this year, we've had a great opportunity to do some maintenance and renovation to some of the pieces that have been needed, but we were able to get some funding this year, and so I have a lot of passion for the sculpture, so it's been something that we've been really going with. And Jack Green, our director, has been very very supportive of that. Here you can see the Mark de Souvero piece. Some people call it the big arrow or the comet. It's really none of those things. It's called For Kepler, and it was based on Kepler, who discovered 3 major laws of planetary motion. And this is actually, in his mind, was a supernova explosion. So that circular center, and then these exploding radials. I think it's one of his best works, I think. Again, he's another sculptor that is in every major collection. He started Socrates Sculpture Park in New York. Again, we're really, really fortunate to have some of these pieces, because they're just stellar examples of contemporary sculpture. And what you're seeing, there was a lot of, we'll talk about this with him, actually. You can see him on the right there. Very jovial guy. He really liked getting into his work. He prolific as well. He's still making work. I think he's probably in his 80s now. But he's still out there doing it. But a lot of this work, I think people don't understand that it came out of this movement against, or maybe not even against, but we had this industrial revolution. And so artists started to have access to tools and materials that they didn't before. And we were also seeing a lot of cast-offs. So you have people like Richard Hunt and Mark Souvero who were taking all of these cast-offs from industry, like I-beams, going to junkyards, finding these things and welding them together and creating something with them that was, much more expressive, and, took this oppressive industry and created something meaningful out of it for them. And you have people like Souvero, who's doing probably a much more geometric abstraction, versus Richard Hunt, who's very expressive in his work. And so it is a very important part of the movement. And I think that it's important to understand art in the context of when it's made and how it's made, because it doesn't just tell us about, is this piece of sculpture art, or is it art? You don't really need to ask that question. It's because it's not about whether or not it's art. It's really about the context of what we can learn about our society, about people, about the human psyche at that time that it's made. It's telling us something more than just, what an individual piece could be. It's about the broad spectrum of what's been created and how it's been created. And it helps us to understand, human progress and where we've come and where we're going. That's just my soapbox on that. But, and so with the Souvero, one of the things that we did this year is there was, over the years, it had been painted several times. And for whatever reason, whether there was a paint at the time that didn't adhere properly, we started to chip really badly. So it was getting just these ugly big peel spots on it, and there was no way to really paint over it. So I wanted to sandblast it and repaint it. Obviously, you can't just do that to a renowned sculpture. So one of the things that we always strive to do in dealing with any of the sculptures when we need to do work is to get with the studios that created them, get with the collectors, the studio, the artist, to make sure that what we're doing is good for the sculpture and safe, and that it's going to be something that's not going to damage it. And so that's what we did here. We got in contact with Mark Souvero and his people, and told them what was wrong, what was going on with the piece, and what we wanted to do. And they were all for it. They gave us the types of paint that he liked to use, why he liked to use them. He really isn't about, interestingly enough, he doesn't really care that much about the color. He just likes it to be shiny. So interesting thing about Mark. And so we had some really great crews come out to do the blasting, the painting, Evan's painting. And prior to that, we did a lot of cleanup work. We have students that intern and work with us. That help and do those things with us as well. Katrina Schaefer, in particular, was part of this, getting this piece ready, and also with some maintenance in the Eugene Brown and other pieces, Cartwright. So our students are very important to our mission. And the next piece I want to talk about a little bit is Fletcher Benton. He was an alumni of Miami, and this was a gift from the class of 1955 and the artist. And this piece is folded circle, 2 squares. Again, he comes out of this movement of geometric abstraction. This is a bronze piece that has weathered and patinaed, which is what he was striving for. You'll see this a lot in bronzes, where they get on this green patina just from the elements. And that was something that he really liked in this piece. Again, he's another artist that is in every major collection. He is, again, just very important that we are able to have these pieces, and that students are able to interact with them and see them and see these sculptures that are, you know, on the national stage and have an opportunity to interact with them. So this piece originally was let's see if I have slides. So originally where this piece sat, where all this gravel is now slate chips, used to be a pond or a wading pool, basically. And you can see from slide on the left that, you know, it had water, and there were a lot of issues with that. And over the years, it just didn't become feasible to have the water in it. We had swans down at the pond that would come up and do all kinds of things in it, and it would always get, the pumps and things would fail, and there were a lot of, you know, you had to shock the water often because of the swans. Yeah, so the swan problem was one of the issues with Fletcher Benton's piece, but eventually they decided to fill in the pond. And when they did that, grounds put in mulch and these small bushes, which at the time weren't really that problematic, but didn't really reflect the original minimalism of the piece. And over time, as you can see in the bottom right, those bushes were no longer little bushes, they became giant bushes and eventually obscured the sculpture. And not wanting to obscure a Fletcher Benton sculpture, we decided to do a little work and pulled out all those bushes. We had FTS come in. They're a local contractor, did a great job making sure not to damage the piece, and also to get everything out and in very quickly. So here you can see we're removing the bushes, bringing in the slate chips, and cleaning it off, getting it ready, which eventually leads to what it originally looked like and what it looks like now. So we just finished this project, so we don't have a lot of great greenery pictures of it yet, but here in the spring, I'm sure we'll get some great shots of it. But I do love that we now can see it in all of its glory, and that, you know, people will be able to experience the sculpture. And with that, so that's a little bit about what we've been doing. Piece on the left is Three Storms. That was part of an original initiative back in the 1990, Seats of Awareness, where the basic plan was to create benches, about 10 of them over the years, like one a year, and then to acquire, I believe it was 13 sculptures for the sculpture park. And that they ended up with 3 benches, and we have, you know, many of the sculptures that came out of that. But this is one of them, and this is a piece that we'll be doing some repainting on in the very near future, as it's an painted aluminum, so it's faded over the years. It's just, again, one of the things you fight against with outdoor sculpture. But if you're interested in even more pieces and more work on campus, Anna Delaria class did an entire project where they did pieces. Well, they went around campus and mapped out all of the different art pieces on campus, and you can click on this or scan this QR code and it'll take you to that site, and you can see all the sculpture on campus, and hopefully you'll come join us here and look at our work. And just in closing, I want to make sure that we thank Tom Smith for his generosity. We wouldn't be able to do these projects if it weren't for you know, his funding. He actually was the one who brought the Souvero sculpture to Miami Art Museum, which is a great addition. He's done several other pieces on campus, the Von Rijdingsvaart, June Kaneko, and we couldn't do any of the sculpture park renovations that we've been doing without his support. And so I just want to thank him as well. And turn things over to Sherry.
Great. Thanks, Dave. There is a URL that you can visit to give us some feedback on this program, which I will put in the chat. Now is the time that we'd like to see if there are any questions. And I have one. We're curious, David, if you have a favorite sculpture, either in our grounds or on campus.
My favorite here is actually the Nancy Holt piece. I just love that you can go down to it. It's a quiet place. You can see from the photo I took, that you can see the deer out the back or for Webster Gallery. That's a picture taken from the museum looking down at the sculpture. You get deer, you get dragonflies every year around that sculpture. So it's just a very serene, beautiful spot to sit and take it in.
Thanks. Another question that we have is, if money were no object, what would you add next to the sculpture park?
What would I add? I really like Magdalena Abakanowicz. She's a Polish sculptor. I think that her pieces would be a great complement to our collection because they're abstract figurative, and we don't have a lot of figure work in our collection, but it bridges that gap between abstraction and figure. And she plays with the scale of these human type figures and with multiples. And it's just, I think she would be a great addition to outdoor pieces.
Great. Okay, we have another question. In regards to the other Nancy Holt sculpture that you mentioned, where was that originally located?
That was originally over by Markham. So Fisher Hall was where Markham Center is now. And it would have been on that, I believe, the north side of the parking lot now, but it was in that area.
Okay. Perfect. Great. I don't see any more questions. Could you advance to the next slide? So we wanted to bring to everyone's attention that this month of April, is International Sculpture Month. And within International Sculpture Month, there is also a designated day, which is Saturday, April the 30th. And so in addition to us being open for gallery viewing from noon to 5 that day and every Saturday till June 11th, we have some special activities planned for that day. It'll be somewhat like an open house. We have this Miami University Steel Drum Band performing on the lawn at 1:30, weather permitting. We'll have some snacks, some crafts, some Frisbees hidden throughout the sculpture park, and a scavenger hunt. And so we hope that you will consider joining us for International Sculpture Day. And we have some other programs that we wanted to call to your attention. I don't know what the next one is in the slide deck. Oh, yes, our next program, which is this 1 week from today. Actually, our next program is at 3 o'clock today. We have a humanities gallery talk and coffee hour, which you can find out more about and all of our events at tinyurl.com/MUAM events. Next Wednesday evening, I believe is the final program for the semester. And it is entitled A Class Act, Students Adding to the Collection, where Michael Hatch and both students and alumni from his class on art and its markets will discuss the process that they go through in their class to research and study works and make recommendation on some works to be acquired into our collection. It's a class interaction that we're very proud to be a part of. And then our next Noontime Chatter is 1 month from today. Episode 4 will feature our director, Jack Green, and the Hafner Museum of Natural History director, Steve Sullivan. And their title of their talk will be Museums Miami, Diverse Collections, Common Goals. And again, to access the link and participate in that, you can visit tinyurl.com/MUA events, or just visit our website and click on events. Did I have any more slides? That is it. Thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at our future programs. Thank you, David.
Thanks.